Chapter 82 Broken Window. The sound of the drums on a spring night is a good time for the cock to crow and the dog to steal. A dark shadow fell from the back wall of the fan mansion as lightly as a leaf, not making a sound as it landed, dusting itself off and disappearing into the night. This person is naturally Fan Xian. He is walking in the dark night, on the other hand. In his heart he thought, why in this world there is no real light skill that can sweep 10 feet at a time? As a result, when he climbed the wall, he would always end up covered in dust. Although Kyoto is prosperous, but at night there are still lights in a few places after all. For example, like the Tile Alley side, because of the night market, there are also jugglers, and then, for example, the water pool side of the Lujing River, in the first half of the night, because of the need to pick up Enkai on board the boat, so there will be some lights by the river. Most of the other streets were dark, with only the ghostly lights of the neighboring houses occasionally projecting through the cracks of the doors onto the stone-paved street, reflecting a thin, dark line. Fan Xian traveled between these blurred and invisible lines, running in the darkness of the night, the cool night breeze hitting his slightly hot face, feeling very comfortable. It didn't take much time before he had arrived in the alley next to the royal courtyard that he had once visited during the day today, and as he looked from afar at the small square building in the courtyard, he frowned. There must be some guards of the inner palace all around him, and in the words of Uncle Wuzhu, who was at best a 7th-grade internal kung fu cultivator with 3rd-grade delicate control, if he wanted to rashly break into the area without not startle these masters, he must be very careful to do so. He must meet Ms. Lin, although he still does not know what the other party's full name is, but he needs to tell the other party who he is, who you will marry in the future, and most crucially, her illness. The dark night was quiet. The sound of the night watchman's clapper had just sounded not long ago, and would certainly not sound again for a short time. Occasionally there would be a few frogs that were slightly too much of a transgression of the season. Fan Xian stood quietly behind the wall at the entrance of the alley, tempering the true qi in his body, letting that overbearing true qi slowly cover his entire body, with the snowy mountain of his back waist as the pivot, perfectly controlling every part of his muscles and his divine sense. He didn't know if Uncle Five Bamboo was around or not, but he knew that he couldn't rely on Uncle Five Bamboo for the rest of his life. Because even if Uncle Five Bamboo was strong, there were times when he couldn't take care of him, otherwise his own mother wouldn't have perished back then. Wiping his hands vigorously on his clothes to ensure that there wasn't too much sweat on them, he then found an unnoticeable place on the back wall of the royal courtyard. His true qi slowly seeped out of his palm, and then wonderfully retracted from the edge of his palm to form a small depression, and just like in the past when he climbed the cliff outside of Tanya Harbor, he easily attached himself to the wall and slowly climbed upwards. This wall was 2 feet high. An ordinary expert would have difficulty jumping over it no matter what, and the wall was smooth, so the royal guard's defense of this place was the weakest, and no one could guess that the one who came to steal the incense this day was actually a Spider-Man. Climbed to the wall, Fan Xian one hand climbed on the wall, one hand wiped off the cold sweat on the forehead, thought to come to see his daughter-in-law, how to take such a big risk. At this time is not the time to regret. Look up at the sky, only to see that the eyebrow moon child is about to disappear into the clouds, cannot help but feel happy. Silver light suddenly dim, whoosh sound. Fan Xian has already silently landed in the garden, like a civet cat, like drilling into the dense short bushes, through the trees to cover their traces. This whole series of action from straight down to forward sprint actually did not make too much noise, thanks to the 5 Bamboo in Tanyu State when he was on the rigorous training. In fact, there weren't too many guards in the courtyard, and at this time near midnight, they were even more lax, only to hear that there seemed to be people still awake at the far front gate, but there was no one inspecting the garden at all. Fan Xian breathed a sigh of relief, carefully walked to the bottom of the small building, looked up and found that the light in the building has long been rested. Dark, he thought in his heart, I do not know if she is asleep. Downstairs, the door was closed, and there was no telling if the old man would be too poisoned to get up in the middle of the night, so Fan Xian bitterly smiled and abandoned this path, turning to the outside of the building, and with his hands slowing down his true strength, he forcefully clasped onto the wooden corridor pillars and climbed to the top. Climbing to the top, the second floor of the wooden pavilion is protruding part of the distance of about 2 feet. Fan Xian lightly exhaled a breath, reached out to touched a small gap, with the index finger and middle finger gouge. The body swings. It hangs in the air, waist and abdomen a borrowed force will swing, like a bat upward or vertical, dead close to the outside of the window. The last words said during the daytime meeting, Fan Xian believes that the girl inside the window must understand what it means, so he was full of confidence, smiled gently, pulled the window. Did not move, he slightly used some force, and then pulled the window. Actually still did not open. Lin Wanner went to bed early, but has not been able to put to sleep, lying under the soft thin quilt, hands grasping the corner of the quilt, a pair of large eyes open in the darkness of the night open. Clear and bright, incomparably looking at the top of the bed above her head, do not know what to think about. The movement outside the window, she immediately heard, her heart tightened, do not know what to do, never thought that teenager is really so bold, actually dare to touch into the royal courtyard in the middle of the night too. She should have called out to people. But the thought that, if the guards rushed over, that beautiful teenager is only afraid of falling into a death sentence, so her heart and some intolerance, tightly biting her lips, do not know what to do. Good thing the window is closed. She comforted herself in her heart, thinking that as long as the other party can't enter, they will naturally know what to do, so that they won't face a situation that they don't even want to think about much, and that teenager won't fall into such a big crime. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned, only to hear the window snick. It was pushed open. A teenager dressed in black holding a slender dagger coated in black lacquer tumbled in from the outside. When Lin Wanner saw this scene through the veil, she subconsciously wanted to cry out, but as soon as she saw that face, that clean and dusty face that she had seen outside the Amon cloth of the Temple of Celebration, for some reason, she swallowed back her cry. Fan Xian moved quickly, without a trace of the shyness that a young boy in love for the first time should have, turned back and closed the window, then walked to the bedside. A hand lifted the Amon, a light fragrance began to spread in the room. Lin Wanner felt slightly confused in her brain, but then after smelling a light fragrance, her whole spirit woke up, and only then did she realize that earlier this teenager had already cast a bewitching fragrance. She was shocked. Could this person be the legendary flower picker? Endless regret began to well up in Lin Wanner's heart, and with her mouth open, she was ready to shout. Fan Xian, however, had no such self-consciousness at all, and was just full of joy as he prepared to shout to wake up this girl. Where did he know that at a glance, the girl was actually still awake, and a look of horror actually appeared in her originally confused eyes, and with her mouth wide open, could it be that she was preparing to shout? He immediately woke up. His body shape drifted, one knee to the bed, one hand covered Lin Wanner's mouth. The palm of his hand touched her soft lips, tickling them. Don't shout, don't shout. For the first time in his life, Fan Xian had entered a house to steal incense, so he was inevitably a bit inexperienced, and said sorrowfully, "It's me, it's me, it's me." Seemingly seeing that the teenager was not malicious, Lin Wanner gradually calmed down. Fan Xian moved his palm away and helplessly whispered, "Don't shout." Lin Wanner suddenly thought of the two strange scents just now and asked anxiously, "What did you do with my maid?" Because the maid was sleeping on the caged couch next to her, she should have woken up long ago with this commotion just now. Fan Xian softly explained, "It's fine, this incense has the effect of tranquilizing the mind, it's not harmful to the body, I just let her sleep for a while." Lin Wanner slightly settled her heart, looking at this clean smiling face in front of her, 1 point of joy, but 3 points of fear. What in the world is this person? What is his identity? Seeing the fear in the pupils of her eyes, Fan Xian said heartily, "Don't be afraid, I'm the doctor from the daytime. Didn't I say I would come at night before I left?" Lin Wanner suddenly smiled sweetly and said, "Didn't you tell me to close the window?" Seeing this beautiful woman suddenly smile, Fan Xian's heart moved, and then looked at the lips, then had other ideas. At this moment, his neck was suddenly cold. A short sword, cold light flashed. The hilt of the sword held in Lin Wanner's hand, but the blade of the sword rested on Fan Xian's neck. Lin Wanner looked at him twice, and suddenly said with a soft heart, "No matter who you are, as long as you leave at this time, I promise not to pursue this matter." Fan Xian had a cold sword on his neck, but his face was still smiling as he looked at her and softly said, "I'll leave later, I just came to see you today." After saying this, he took out an oil paper bag from his pocket, not caring about the sharp cut on his neck, but Lin Warner was afraid of cutting him mindlessly and subconsciously moved her sword outside. Fan Xian tore open the oil paper, took out a fragrant chicken leg from inside, came to her lips, said with a smile, "That day in the Qing temple ate one of your chicken legs. Know that you crave for this mouth, so specially for you to bring over." Lin Warner cried and laughed, thinking that what time is this? This teenager is actually still so nonsensical. If the guards find a strange man in their room, then both of them will be all finished. Shaking her voice, she said, "Please, just go away." Fan Xian was prepared to follow the small talk routine and tease the other party again, but seeing how frightened Miss Lin was, his heart softened and he coaxed, "Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you." As soon as this sentence is exported, it feels a bit wrong. How is it very much like the lines often said by flower pickers and martial arts novels in the past life? As expected, Lin Warner's color changed greatly, and she put her sword on his neck and said in a trembling voice, "I don't care who you are. If you want to make light of me, I'll go down with my sword." Fan Xian then thought, he entered the woman's room, is indeed a very bad thing to the other side of the name, but look at Ms. Lin's face determined look, but cannot help but think, is it you are ready to murder your own husband?